we'll go ahead and welcome everybody into, we're going to call it the SCAC preview show here a couple of days before the Southern Collegiate Athletic Conference championship tournament. For those that don't know, if you're clicking on this, you probably at least have an idea. My name is EJ Sanchez. I'm one of the broadcasters and media personnel for Concordia University, Texas. And I had the idea, as all of these postseason tournaments are going on, how are we going to be able to preview this? Well, I had to look for another person who knows this conference in and out, who has seen both of these teams play. And so, of course, you can take to social media, and I am joined by Mr. Reed Rosales of Trinity. So, Reed, welcome. I appreciate you doing this. So, go ahead and tell Elise a little bit about yourself before we just jump into this and talk some ball.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of the broadcasters at Trinity University. I've done baseball, volleyball, softball, men's and women's basketball, the works. And this baseball season, I've been kind of keeping everybody updated on what the standings look like. Last year, I went way more in depth with the baseball coverage, but senior this year, so I've been kind of reeled back a little bit. But I'm still keeping in touch with everything, catching every game I can.
Of course, man. And look, the tournament starts right around the corner. It starts on Friday at the Dale Diamond, and we're gonna go in depth, or as in depth as we can, on the four teams that are going to be there. I also wanted to highlight the fact that we got it out of the way first. I am a Concordia alum. You're a soon-to-be Trinity graduate, so we're not going to try to hide from that. But also, I think you and I have watched all four of these teams enough to where we can form, an opinion that is not just based, on our color ties, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't worry, we're not gonna be like, I think Trinity's gonna win because they're my guys.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, man. So, let's go in reverse order. We can just start and just go right into it. And we can jump into the Celts of the University of St. Thomas. Reed, they're 17 and 13. Okay. And that's how they finished. They finished actually in a tie with TLU. And because of virtue of the tiebreaker that they played at Constellation Field halfway through the year, that's why they get the tiebreaker. And I believe that you previewed that series that week, if I'm not mistaken, on your social media, saying, "Hey, this could very well be deciding who's going to be that fourth team." And so, first of all, kudos to you on that. Second of all, I want to hear your initial thoughts on the team and their season overall before I jump into what I saw this week when they played Concordia.
The Celts have been a very interesting team for certain. Coming into the season, I wasn't really picturing them to be in the spot that they're in. They started off their season a bit rough against Centenary. They split against Southwestern, and then the third game got moved back way to the end of the season, and they ended up winning that series, which was very important. They needed that win.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the most important series for them was that TLU series. They needed the sweep, not just a series win. They had to sweep the Bulldogs in order to get in. The Celts, they have one of the best hitters in the country in Alex Trin. He has an crazy batting average, like top 10 in the nation. They're dangerous, but they've got something lingering over them in that they haven't beaten any of the rest of the tournament field in a series so far. They're 1-8 against them. They have one win against McMurray, so they're out for a bit of revenge in this conference tournament, and they need to win this conference tournament to continue their season.
And that's why I'm glad you noted there at the end is that the other three teams, we'll have time to get into it, but the other three teams have to feel good about their chances for an at-large bid at this point. I mean, you're talking about Trinity, who has been in the top 25 all year, who has never dropped out. Concordia has spent most of the season in the top 25. McMurray has been receiving votes, and we'll get into them, but they're finished at 31-9, the same record as Concordia. St. Thomas has to win this. Okay. And I'm glad you touched on that. It's fresh on my brain. Alex Trin is a dude. Okay. Dylan McKee, their first baseman, the transfer for St. Mary's, 50 plus RBIs. He hit another home run this week. So you start there. The Celts are led by offense and offense alone. Okay. And that's no disrespect to their pitching stats. Just if you look at the stats, that is what their profile entails. And here's what I somewhat worry about with St. Thomas is that they had a chance to see if their run could be validated by beating those tournament teams at the end of the year. They had two series to finish off the year. They played Trinity and they played Concordia. They get swept against Trinity, including, I believe, game two was 21-12. So
Yeah.
already that makes you pause and say, okay, you know what? Trinity's beaten everybody. Trinity hasn't lost a conference series. That happens to people. Well, then you get to go play Concordia at the end of the year. And by this time, the seeding is kind of set. We knew that Trinity was going to be one, and we knew that St. Thomas was going to be four. So with not a ton to play for, that's how Concordia went into that series. With as much respect as you can give towards it, that was a thorough demolition of the Celts in that final series of the year. Concordia's done it to everybody at home, but three consecutive run rules. Concordia played 21 innings of baseball this weekend, 14-4, and two 10-0 games. I worry about that because I don't know how psychologically you can talk to your team after that and say, hey, I know these 6 games just happened, but we have to go play them again. And I don't know how well you can do that.
Yeah, it's a difficult position to be put in. It's one of the reasons I like the SCAC tournament a lot is that it is the top 4 teams. A lot of tournaments around the country have like 8 or 10 teams get in. That's like the entire conference basically. And you have a lot of, teams that maybe don't deserve to be there and are just there to be a warm up for the higher seeds. It's not the case here. Even though the St. Thomas, they're coming in at a market disadvantage record wise compared to everyone else, everyone's going to be taking them very seriously going into this. It's a regional format. It's what you're going to face in the postseason. And, in the postseason, surprises happen. And I wholly believe in, Alex Trin, Dylan McKee, all those guys on the batting order. If they get to your pitching, you better watch out or hope you have someone in the pen that can shut them down because once they get rolling, it can be a bit difficult to stop them.
I alluded to it in the series I just called against Concordia because at one point, the 14-4 game that I mentioned, I believe it was game two, Alex Trin and Dylan McKee made it a 4-3 game by themselves. And you turned around and you said, okay. And also the Dell Diamond, probably as neutral of a pitching field as you're going to get. I don't know how that's going to factor in, but that's what you said. That's what you had to do. And if there is a Cinderella, you have to categorize it as St. Thomas because again, like you said, records wise, they are not to the same. They're just not the same record. They're not. You have two 31-9 teams, and you have Trinity, who's 33-7, and you finish 19-18 overall. So we're just reading out the numbers. Now, do I think St. Thomas can sneak up and put a scare into somebody in this tournament and maybe win a game that they're not supposed to? Absolutely.
And you know what? I think maybe an advantage people aren't realizing is St. Thomas has played in the most fields in the SCAC because they don't have a home field. They played at Houston Christian, they played at Sam Houston, they played at Constellation Park. They played in so many different areas that they don't really get to get their feet set in one home. I think that puts them at a bit of an advantage because, you get to another place. For them, it's like, okay, it's business as usual. We'll go in, play the field. Everyone else has played, a lot of home games at their park that you get used to after a while.
No, I absolutely get it, including the top two seeds who are dominant at home, but also both on turf fields. Dell Diamond's all dirt. So there's a lot of different factors, and that's why I'm glad that you are getting a team like St. Thomas. So now that we finished up with the Celts, we move on to maybe the biggest wild card of this entire tournament, and we're talking about McMurray. They came in as the 3 seed, 39 overall, 22-8 in conference. Let's touch on their series against Trinity first. You were there. I watched from afar. Okay. The first 2 games, okay, it looked like Trinity said, hey, not so fast. You're having a good season, but let's take care of this. And then game 3 rolls around. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, McMurray was up 5-2 and then didn't record an out and then got walked off. And then they were swept in San Antonio. So they've seen the best. Take me through that, and then I can take you through the other good series that they've had.
Yeah, that series, it was very bizarre out of McMurray because coming into this, we were thinking, okay, on the Broncos, you're like, okay, this is going to be high scoring games, like 15-12, these kind of shootout games that they had been having before coming into there. And then game one happens, like, okay, that was strange, but Trinity, great pitching staff. That happens to even the best of offenses that go up against them. Game two happens, and they're like, man, McMurray doesn't really look like McMurray right now. And they had a huddle out in right field afterwards where the coach was giving it some words of inspiration for the next day because those 2 days, they did not look like they were playing McMurray brand baseball. Then game three rolls around, and it is their best chance to win. And the Tigers, no outs recorded. I mean, it goes all credit to Trinity, right? I mean, to
Mhm.
make the walk off with no outs, that's crazy. But I think the biggest factor that reared its ugly head time and time again is McMurray and the pitching staff beyond the starting rotation. They're a bit thin. We saw some repeat guys come back to the mound. Aragon came back to the mound to throw in game three, and he's the one that ended up giving up those runs that and leading to the walk-off. It's things like that that give pause about McMurray, where it's okay, the bats are really good. Smosna, amazing. Riley Hood, awesome bat. I mean, they showed off it against Trinity. Should have been player of the week, Michael Smosna, but SCAC doesn't really give players of the week to teams that lose series. So it's kind of like, oh well. But no, those guys are ballers, but you have to keep up with your pitching staff, or your pitching staff has to make sure to keep the runs low. And neither of those things happened. The bats couldn't really do anything against Trinity pitching.
And that the lineup is what you have to focus on when you're talking about McMurray. Okay. One of the sources I talked to, he's a coach, and it's not a Concordia one. Before you're saying like, oh, EJ went to Concordia, blah blah blah. This is just a different source, and amongst a coach that is not in the tournament. And he told me that McMurray is one of the scarier matchups in the top two because of their almost reckless abandon and how they swing the bats. Seven of these players in this starting lineup, two of them you just mentioned, we'll get to them in a second, they're returners from last year. And the team last year was a pretty dang good team that went to the American Southwest Conference tournament, and they moved on in that tournament. So that you're absolutely right. And to me, Michael Smazda and Riley Hood are two Division I hitters. Okay. You have Smazna out of Lubbock, who's batting 443. Riley Hood is batting 401. We're not in February anymore. You're not supposed to be hitting that still. And both of them have continued to. I mean, Xavier Escobar as well. I mean, Coy Carpenter is their leadoff hitter batting 260, and he's a menace on the base paths. Okay. I played against all these guys. Again, I want to make sure it's clear that, like, this isn't me just, looking over everything. I know what makes this McMurray team tick. And by the way, they took 2 out of 3 from Concordia in the first series between them at the very beginning of the year. Now, are these two teams completely different than where they were in February? Absolutely. I don't think any coach that's coaching in this tournament or any player that's playing in it would say, oh, yes, we are exactly the same team we were on February 25th. I don't think anybody would say that. But, I mean, you talk about their rotation. Ethan Wendell, he has a 4.33 ERA, but 2 weeks ago was the SCAC pitcher of the week. And one of these guys, me and you mentioned before we went live here, they might be pitching their best as of right now. I mean, Wendell alone in his last 5 starts, he has yet to allow more than 2 runs. So I don't know who's going to face off against him in the first round with Concordia. That's who they're going to be playing. If it is him in game one, I don't think that McMurray's at a serious disadvantage pitching wise. And I put that offense against anybody in the conference.
Absolutely. They started out the year kind of shocking, not just the conference, but the nation when they went over to Shreveport Center, hosted the Diamond Gents Classic, and they pummeled all their opponents there. They blanked Huntingdon, who's a good team. Rhodes College was a ranked team to start the year. They beat them 23-8. That is crazy to be a nationally ranked team that badly that early on in the season. And they beat LaGrange, who's been another historically really good program, 12-2. And everyone was kind of like, okay, we see you, McMurray. And then they roll into conference and they beat Concordia at first SCAC series, like you said. And they also have a series win over St. Thomas. But one of the reasons why they aren't the 2 seed and they're the 3 seed is that they seem to have like these hiccup games every once in a while where you drop game one to Dallas. I don't know what it is with Dallas winning game ones this year. They did it against Trinity. They did it against
Concordia.
McMurray. They did it against Concordia. Don't play. Dallas might show up for game one and say, we're going to be in the tournament for just one game.
Nobody
because,
wants.
yeah, because they have some voodoo magic in game ones, it seems. But then after the Trinity sweep, they dropped one to Southwestern. They dropped one to St. Thomas. They swept Austin. They dropped one to TLU. It's those dropping single games, they added up over time. And that's why they're the 3 seed and not the 2 seed. And, Concordia gets the benefit of being on the bottom part of the scoreboard. Whether that matters against McMurray or not, we'll see. But I think they're really hot to come into the end of the year. They have a pretty convincing win over Centenary, who's kind of been really good in the pitching department, especially with Herrera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think watch out for McMurray. They are, like you said, they are a wild card. They get onto the field and you're expecting an offensive showdown. And unless you got a really good pitcher on the mound, you're probably going to get that.
I mean, they're 3 of the 4 teams in this tournament are 3 of the hottest teams in the country. Trinity comes in winning 12 straight. McMurray comes in winning 9 straight. Concordia comes in winning 8 straight. So again, this is almost points back to the St. Thomas thing where you're like, throw your hands up. Maybe you can get one, but I think, like you said, the one thing they're going to have to answer, not saying that they can't, is how long can your pitching go? Because you have to win 3 games regardless. Now, that's if you do it the easy way. If you drop a game and you have to play, I don't know how much they have, but I've been surprised before. And I'm looking forward to this first round game with Concordia because these two have turned into rivals. Because if you remember, both McMurray and Concordia moved from the American Southwest Conference to the SCAC this year. And last year, 2 extra inning games in their regular season. Concordia is the one that bounced them in the tournament. And so they kind of got their revenge earlier this year. And it's kind of, a situation of, hey, meet me back here next year. And so I think I'm looking forward to this matchup probably more than Trinity St. Thomas, but we'll have time to talk about that. And so now it's time to get to the 2 seed. I mean, you're talking about Concordia, Texas, 31-9, the same overall record, but they took care of business in sweep fashions more than McMurray did. They come in 24-6. I just said they won 8 straight. And the manner in which they've won their last 2 series makes me think that all other teams in the conference have to look at, okay, this is a runaway train right now, because Texas Lutheran, who could be in the tournament if they did not lose the head-to-head. Okay, so clearly a quality ball club that was receiving votes. You have a run rule victory in there and then a home sweep. And what they did to St. Thomas, who is already going to be there, makes you have to look and say, okay, this might be the hottest offense, at least in this tournament.
Yeah, and with Concordia, it's so many batters that are so good. I mean, Zach Zygrist, he's hitting 390. Aaron Gomez, he's hitting 390. And then you get to the pitching staff, coming into that series with Trinity, which was a great series. That was a series against 2 top teams in the conference, and they really played like it. Otto Franz and Dakota Palmer, yeah, they held that Trinity offense down pretty well. And it was a close game between 2 powerhouses in the SCAC. They played like it. It's like no matter where you attack them from, they have an answer. And you're right. They've been sweeping people in very dominant fashion. And coming into this, they are one of the hottest, if not the hottest team coming into the tournament. Like you look at their schedule and you try to see a place like, well, where's their struggle point this year? And it's like they almost don't have one because they've dropped a single game here and there, but there hasn't been a lot of really big losing streaks. Maybe a 2-game losing streak at some point in the season, but no, they're red as hot as they can be, and the Tornadoes are going to be picking up wind heading into Dell Diamond.
And here's what I like about the matchup that we could potentially see if they get by McMurray. At some point, it looks like Trinity and Concordia are going to have to play over that series again. And I'm glad you mentioned it because for those that don't know, Trinity took game one, Concordia took game two, Trinity took game three. All of them one-run ball games. But if you look at it, Concordia led for more innings amongst that 3-game set. Game three was decided by Trinity and Concordia playing super regional baseball in early March, which was, I think it was a Maddox McDonald ground ball up the middle with a runner on second. And green light was sent, forced them to make a play, and the play didn't turn out in Concordia's favor. It turned out in Trinity's, and then you throw in their bullpen, and they cleaned it up. But Concordia led for it. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that I think that if you ask the Trinity staff and you ask the Concordia staff, like they would say the same thing about each other, in which, hey, that's a playoff team that we got to play in late March. And Concordia comes in with, I think, 2 of the top 5 starters, as you alluded to, in the conference, bar none. Trinity might have 2 of them too. Trinity might have 2 of them, and then I think respectfully, you have to throw in Jake Estrada in there from the University of the Ozarks. That's a big thing to have. You have 2 starters with sub-3 ERAs, and that's the one thing you can hang your hat on. Now, kind of the same thing as McMurray. This is the funny part, is that McMurray's bullpen has been tested, and you don't know what you're going to get. By virtue of beating people too bad, too early, their bullpen doesn't have a lot of work in the last 3 weeks. They doesn't. And they have a very quality closer in Ralph Wallace III, who hasn't gotten to throw because his team keeps winning in 7 innings. So is your bullpen ready after getting the final basically week and a half off? That's the question that I have. And that's why I'm excited to see this get into late Saturday, potentially Sunday.
Yeah, and if you're Concordia, you have to go into this thing. Okay, it's not a very good chance that we're going to run rule any of these teams in tournament time, right? Even with that St. Thomas series being in run rule fashion, they're going to be coming in giving all their effort because they know their season at this point is on the line if they end up playing St. Thomas. But McMurray, like, yeah, McMurray, you're not going to beat that team in 7 innings. It's very, very unlikely. And if it does happen, then we're talking a very different conversation about who's actually favored in this tournament.
I mean, no, you're just talking about an offense like you were talking earlier. We didn't even get to Colby Christian and Kalen Clark, who might be battling for 2 of the top 5 spots of Player of the Year. Having 60 RBIs is absurd, by the way, and 15 home runs. That's what Christian has done this year. So yeah, that's the first matchup, the 2 and the 3 seed, and now we finally get into the number 1 overall seed, and we're talking, of course, about your Trinity Tigers, 33-7 overall, 27-3 in conference play, and the sentiment around them, and I think it's more than earned, is they have the right to be called the best team in the SCAC until they are proven otherwise.
Yeah, I'd agree. Starting the year, first of all, we started with a SCAC series, which hasn't happened in my 4 years here. An absurd amount of conference games have been played this year, 27-3 in conference. You tell me we'd have that conference record last year, I'd be like, what? And now they start off, they get like a very convincing sweep over Austin College, and then they sweep Texas Lutheran, where game 1 is a 21-7 game. Like, we went into that game thinking like, okay, TLU, this is going to be a conference tournament team. We're thinking like they're going to be a lock. And we start off like crushing one of the pitchers of the week that they had in a round. And we're like, whoa. Then we play Concordia. You go out and beat Concordia in that 2-1 series. It's close. That's what we were expecting. You go out there, you play another top team in the conference, probably going to be the 2 seed in the conference tournament. That's this kind of series you're expecting. Like you said, super regional baseball. Then they get the sweep of McMurray, and they are red hot at this point. They've only dropped a game against Concordia up to that point. They started a crazy record. And then spring break hits and things start to slow down a little bit. They dropped one against DeSales in a fashion that they didn't really look like they were playing their brand of baseball. They love hard ground balls, and in that game they were kind of swinging for the fences a lot against a DeSales pitching staff that was really stretched thin at that point.
Mhm.
Then they split against nationally ranked SUNY Cortland. They're a really good team out of New York. They're going to be in the NCAA tournament they're going to be an at-large bid if they don't win the SUNYAC. And then they drop one to Mary Hardin Baylor, and then they start picking it up again, and they go on a big winning streak. Then they start meandering through Dallas and Shriner. They dropped game one against Dallas. I guess who hasn't at this point? And then they dropped that one game against Shriner, game one,
That's
and that was a bit of a wake up call to the team. 11 innings, lost it at the end. It's a wake up call. They hit 7 home runs the next day against the Mountaineers to run rule them. Then it's a 1 run game against Shriner the day after or that. And then against Centenary, it was, oh man, they dismantled Tyler Herrera.
they're
They
back.
just straight up. Tyler Herrera has never had great luck at Trinity. I think it's his worst matchup in his career, but in that game, it was especially present. And it's just a convincing win against Centenary. They come back and get the revenge against UMHB. They sweep St. Thomas, and they ended off in style against Southwestern with their sweep. We had a couple pitchers come into bat for senior day, which was really fun. Trajan Lee came in to swing, and Jack Breezy came in to swing the bat. Breezy almost ran it out, not quite, but I think it's the most that'll be the most remembered part of that senior day for sure. But yeah, they're red hot.
And three of these teams are, and that's what's crazy. I mean, when you talk about Lazara, Tinker, McDonald, and Baker, as good of a first four as I'll put up in the conference, I put them right with the Segrist, Gomez, Clark, and Christian four, which is so fun because they mirror each other statistically. Where the top two seeds, your first four batters are all batting 370 plus.
And coming into the season, EJ, it was kind of a lot of question marks of, they graduated a lot of seniors that were real contributors to the team. Like Jack Peterson, Jack Baker, Jackson Tier. And you come into the season thinking, okay, well, who's going to come in and pick up the pieces? And these guys, they've done it. They really have. You're right. Lazera is been hitting out of his mind for the entire year. Guy Tinker, he's been heating up in these past couple of weeks. He's been here for 6 years at Trinity, and he's putting together his best season by far. Maddox McDonald, he's got a great bat, but something that goes unnoticed is his defense. He's robbed a home run this year. He's never committed an error at his position. I'll knock on wood on that, just in case anyone wants to blame me for if he makes one in the SCAC tournament.
Protect
Will
yourself.
Baker, yeah, Will Baker, brother of Jack Baker, so comes in as that family tie. He's blasting up balls out of the stadium. He's hitting really well. Caleb Woodward's heating up. And even guys who kind of struggled at the beginning of the year, Michael Lustina, he's been a really good defensive piece for the Tigers at shortstop. But, he was hitting under 200 after the first half of the year. He's been hitting 485 cents. It's a team peaking at the right time. The question is, will they continue to peak through the SCAC tournament, or have they reached their peak? And that's kind of the question that a lot of these teams are going to have to answer is, are we peaking too soon?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's that, and it's the pitching staff. Jace Clay coming out of nowhere, just a pitch gem after gem after gem. And one thing that's really good about the Trinity team is the pitching staff. They're one of the best in the nation. Trajan Lee, who's been struggling as of late, when he struggles, you have Will Taylor, Brandon Morio, Kyle Hoggett, Jack Boussard, Jake Beck, Wes Hellings, Will Hellings to turn to out of the bullpen or to even make a start if you need. And you have to wonder, like, if you're an offensive team, like it's just guy after guy on the mound that has stuff that's just so difficult to adjust to. They're not a one-headed, two-headed, or three-headed monster. They're about a 30-headed monster heading into Dell Diamond.
No, I completely agree. And that's why the profiles of all these teams in which they're a little bit different makes it so fun to watch because it's almost with the way that Concordia and McMurray and St. Thomas can swing it, the way Trinity can throw it. It's almost like an unstoppable object meets an immovable, like it's that whole dynamic. So before we get out of here, in 30 seconds, your prediction, who wins the SCAC tournament championship?
I'm gonna go with Trinity, not because of my homerism. Don't worry about that. But I think pitching staffs in these tournament situations are the most important thing. And I think Jace Clay, Will Taylor, Brandon Morio, Trajan Lee, they are, in my opinion, one of the best pitching staffs in the conference. And pitching is what wins championships. In the past 20 years, only two teams haven't had a pitching staff ERA in the nation's top 25 and won the College World Series.
Hmm.
And the Tigers right now meet that MMO. So pitching wins championships, similar to defense.
It's almost when you look at March Madness early on and you say, okay, who falls into that? That's a great place to start. Concordia right now, their ERA is 4.82, and I gave away my guess there is that I'm taking the NATOs with mine. And just for the way they ended the season. And it's not wins, it was convincing wins. And it's a confident bunch right now. So, and I think that it comes down to those two teams in the championship. And so I'm interested to see, where it goes. I hope we've made it clear. I don't put anything past St. Thomas or McMurray to sneak up and bite one of those teams. I don't. But I think if you look at numbers and how all of these teams feel, don't think you can go either wrong with either of those. So Reed, before we get out of here, I appreciate it, man. This was a great time. And, we could be staring at a 3-bid conference potentially. And, so if that happens, we might be back in a week, 10 days or so talking about different regionals. So we appreciate you, man. And, we'll see if this comes around again.
Yeah, for sure, AJ. It's been awesome doing this.